Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the May meeting of the Town of Philipstown Conservation Board. First order of business, minutes. We are behind in both the February and March, right?
No, it's March.
March and April. Okay. Let's begin with March. Have we reviewed the minutes? Okay.
Yeah,
Can I have a, yes, I saw that. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes for March?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. The April minutes, have we had time to look at those?
Yes.
I have. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Second? Were you not, you didn't look at April, or you were not? Okay.
I think I only saw March, yeah.
Okay, so,
No, it's a year from April.
all right, so then we have to hold April till next month. It's as easy as that. Okay. So, no worries whatsoever. So, first piece of business will be William and Emily Duncan, 311 East Mountain Road, South, Cold Spring. So what we see is updated is you did receive a DEC permit.
Yep. I think that was the only last outstanding piece to this, from what I recall. I don't think we had any additional comments after the site visit.
Yeah, I think we're good to go with this.
Yeah.
And I confirmed with the homeowner that we have all the paperwork that was referenced in the permit that was issued to them, so I think we can.
Right, and we had within the, because I was reading the minutes this morning, we had outlined the conditions of the permit. So if you can put the permit together.
Sure.
You'll be good to go within days.
Yep.
So
Okay.
we need,
Just need, need to
No,
vote on it.
I thought we had made a motion on, I gave you the minutes. I believe, could you check, April, I'm pretty sure we actually made a motion for a conditional permit.
pending the DEC.
Yeah, pending the DEC. If you could check
Good
that.
with you?
I think so.
Yeah,
How does it work with all permits? Does all permit run in conjunction with this permit, or it's a separate,
they're separate, but we normally.
separate with the same,
If it's something that would be controlled by the state or at times the Army Corps of Engineers, we request that they have those permits in place first.
and then we just agree with what they
Yeah.
said? Unless we can come up with something in addition to it. Good.
Usually we would be more restrictive,
Yeah, we tend to be more
but
restrictive.
we'll reference the permit in our permit.
I don't see it. You thought you were gonna motion on this?
Okay, so then we'll do it a second time.
Sure.
The conditions were what needed to be modified on the site plan was erosion controls, which were not put in place. Right? I don't think we had.
During construction?
Yeah,
Yeah, they have the silt sock.
The pond project. No.
no. Okay, I thought that was not on the plans. And the other condition was, obviously, to have the DEC permit.
Right. Okay.
And they sent that.
Yes.
Yes, they said
I
that.
ha- we have that.
So with that, do I have a motion to issue a permit?
Make that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
You'll email me the permit or let me know it's
Yep.
ready and I'll
Yeah,
come
I'll
to
work
the
on it,
town
I'll
hall.
work on it this week or early next week, and then, you'll bring everything completed to the building department, and then you'll be good to go from our side, and then he'll issue the building permit.
Okay,
thank you.
thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
I did find the April minutes, I had it in my packet, but I didn't read it.
It's okay.
Sorry I missed it.
We don't have a quorum anyway to pass that because Madeline wasn't here. Okay. Next piece of business is a referral from the planning board. Gatekeepers Management LLC, 3691 Route 9.
She did. Yeah, sleepless nights have started. Those were for the planning board. First thing I was gonna present was a picture. Yeah, yeah. Yep, yep, yep. Good evening.
Okay, so I think all of us, with the exception of Bob, have seen the site. And that includes MJ and Lou, right? So, you know, as we discussed before, where I think we're a little uncomfortable, but we also understand the rationale, that normally if there were gonna be construction vehicles parked within what's the Clove Creek Aquifer overlay, we would want some system of runoff containment. You don't think that's feasible. Have you gone any further with your engineer?
So I discussed with our engineer, as we looked at maybe some potential options. I think, as far as landing for talking about like a concrete pad and that, it seemed his advice was over-engineering something, like the way he phrased it was banking for the worst, which I understand we're trying to do that, but we have a spill shed, try to contain, but we're talking 3 dump trucks potentially. The likelihood of those, just not people doing oil changes, no one's washing vehicles on property, anything like that. That as far as doing an impervious surface of that magnitude might be a little bit over the top. I know we had discussed a geotextile potential. That might be a better option, I think, as far as costs. It does buy time, obviously if we saw some sort of spill, we would start at, take the proper measures to remove it, but that would also buy time on a spill. But I think to engineer a pad, and in discussing with him, he said that for 3 trucks potentially, outside the buffer on top of that was a bit much. I mean,
because what I'd like to do is I'd like to produce in the next day or two before, because you're before the planning board this Thursday.
yes.
So I'd
yep.
like to, I'd like to provide a memo or email that gives them some guidance on it. So do you feel, one of the recommendations I think we all agreed upon is to delineate the wetland with semi-permanent markers. We had suggested a split rail fence. I mean, you could do stones if you wanted to too. I think that's probably more expensive, but that would be your choice. So we would recommend that. I guess, I'd like the rest of the board to weigh in. I do myself believe there should be some form of prevention that runoff of particularly petroleum products does not seep down.
For the markers, we've often required like a barrier fence or, some type of physical option, so not just a stake in the ground that can be kind of lost,
No.
but something that actually delineates it
Right.
and shows it, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Right, we were talking about, I had suggested, I think, or Max had suggested a post and rail fence. That's one way.
Right.
You had suggested you'd want to put stones down. That works too, but
Oh,
you're
yeah,
going to need a lot
yeah.
of rocks.
Yeah.
I don't think I would be personally happy if you're using like mafia blocks.
No, no.
Because we don't know exactly what's in them. So if you wanted to use boulders, I think that's fine. I think it's probably less expensive to use a post and rail, but that would be your decision. And that just delineates it.
I've got a steel stake, just a wire on it. That blends into everything.
Yeah. Something, to me, I'd like it to be a semi-permanent marker, so it can't be removed easily, but that's fine.
Yeah, but I think the intent is to protect from people going in or accidentally mistaking with
Yeah.
a barrier. Oh, I didn't see the barrier, and parking something over there.
Yeah.
So that's why it was something physically that would be seen, and
Right. So I think so we're gonna suggest that, and I think what we're gonna do at this point, input from everybody else that I'll word it that we're sensitive to budget constraints of the owners of the property, but we do feel that there should be some form of a barrier or protection that in case there is a spill of whether it's petroleum products or something else, that it can be contained and does not leach down into the aquifer.
Do we have like a model property that we know of that we could look towards?
No, we
I couldn't
don't.
think of one. I know we've talked about this a couple of times.
We do,
With like the other
you know,
truck plates.
there's a few others we've done within the Claude Creek Aquifer. There was a company that was, I guess it was a big landscaping or construction operation we did recently. And I don't know if they built it yet, but they were proposing to build a pole building. And once they did a pole building, obviously there's a pad, and it's a way to do, you know, conventional stormwater management. The owners here don't want to do that because they're basically not getting a lot of rent for what they're doing. And we're just trying to come up with something that's tenable on a budgetary standpoint.
Yeah, to be clear, we're trying to do something. I mean, we've had this property for quite a long time. Prior to this, you know, we were a heavy construction dealership, which we had 0 spills, and at times we had 20+ machines there. We're trying to do something without having, I don't even think we've cut down a single tree on the property, without trying to make a monstrosity or something huge there and develop it. We're just trying to do something modest. So that's really where we're at with this. So when we talk budgetary constraints, it's of course because we're not trying to do this extra level or put up a big building or anything like that.
Right.
Just we have a bunch of open land, we're outside the buffer, you know, we figure why not, you know, just put something. We're not trying to bring in a huge, again, we don't have a tenant even right now. So this is all like a theoretical thing, but that's why we're trying to find something that's a little bit of flexibility with obviously some constraints with the site plan where when we look for a tenant, it's going to be inside of this. But modest is really the key word I want to keep like kind of hammering home here.
And since you're not doing the work in the property, you know, that's why there's a little bit of concern, you know, like you do have a track record yourself, you know.
Well, I live on the property still. So like when me and my wife live there, we have tenants there. My parents live a 1/10 of a mile from the property. So although it's not something that we're on and it's like maybe my company that's operating and doing it, it is very much so. Yes, very much so. So all of the tenants, even the one we have in there now, the opening line I said to him was, we're about to go into a marriage here, where if this isn't a good fit for me and a good fit for you, then we're just gonna go separate ways. You know, so it's a personality, it's the business. For our building now, we went through 41 different tenants before we landed on one. So when I say like we're strategic in who we're deciding to bring here, it would apply to this as well. Not just anyone with, you know, a machine and, you know, or a dump truck or, you know, whatever can come in there. I would very much be scrutinizing who's going to be our tenant on our property.
Tony, you had brought something up, which I thought was very valid.
Yeah, I was just concerned about, you said it's just gonna be rock and stone and mulch, right?
Yeah, not even mulch, no mulch.
There's gonna be no salt and sand,
Correct.
no fertilizer,
Correct,
no
absolutely.
pesticides.
Absolutely, none
Yeah,
of
so
that.
then it wouldn't be a problem, we put that, if it ends up at a note in the site plan.
I'm
Yeah, in
fine.
case
Yeah,
that tenant goes and then someone else comes
sure.
and they do landscaping and tree spraying.
So if we're gonna go this far, then does that also give us the opening then to not have to do an impervious surface? Like if we're willing to do something like that? Because I mean, really, we're talking about a couple trucks, you know?
Right, I understand that. How do I put it? I find we're a little bit of between a rock and a hard place in the sense that we're sympathetic to your, you know, economic needs, if you will, you know, what makes sense. At the same time, we don't want to set a precedent that all of a sudden somebody else is going to say to us, well, you didn't make gatekeepers do it. At the same time, we're further sensitive that there's a lot of stuff that's grandfathered that's really not fun near you and along the road.
Yeah, that's
So I'm
what.
trying, what we're trying to do is come up with a balance where right now, it's, lack of a better analogy, you're sort of proposing in vague terms a development, if you will. but we don't really know what it is. So I'm trying, we're trying to make it as easy for you. So I would still what we'll do is we'll recommend to the planning board that we would like to see some form of possible containment, both for the trucks, and I'm gathering from the storage bins that will be cement or something underneath it. At the same time, it's really out of our purview, but I feel that we should suggest to the planning board that you should screen the property, but not build a berm.
Please.
Which would save you, which would
Yeah,
free
please.
up some other funds, because the berms, I don't know if you've seen them, the berms really don't, they screen temporarily, but, it's a lot of material that you're bringing in. You're putting trees on it, and it's not the most healthy substrate for them to live on. So if some money could be saved there, and then there was a way you could use a geotextile or something, we might have a complete win-win situation.
And what's the driver for the berms?
It's, the planning board likes to screen.
Yeah, they try to, from getting, typically you get a tree that's about 6 feet tall, so their idea is, you build it on a berm that's 3-4 feet, and it's already achieving, 9-10 feet.
We should make that note, though. We should make that distinction that this is this is to alleviate finances being put on that,
Yep,
so that they can still buy 6-foot trees potentially,
yep.
and not be pressed to buy 15-foot trees,
Yep,
and then that,
yep,
thank you.
Yep.
negates it,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
No, because that becomes silly. To my mind, I'm not a landscaper, but it would be to me, if we're gonna screen stuff like that, you put alternating evergreens.
Right.
So as they grow in, then you'll decide, 10 years or 15 years from now, every other tree do you sacrifice?
Mm,
And you have a full screen,
yeah, something healthy.
Is there anything else we wanna put in this short memo?
I don't have anything.
I do understand the financial burden of the runoff and their engineers saying it's over-engineering, but it has to be done,
Okay.
because this is our aquifer.
Right.
I don't think that we should compromise where a basic need of water is concerned. So, I was reading this, and I'm glad that the applicant clarified, because when you read the memo about it, it does sound loosey-goosey. So, we could do, we'll have 4 concrete bins, but it's for, it's in such an umbrella of site preparation materials and landscaping products, construction equipment products. Later on they go on to say that it's a storage for stone and milling and topsoil and gravel and soil fill and inert filling materials. Millings are from it's asphalt.
Right.
It's
well,
recycled
right.
asphalt.
You're
which-
referring, excuse me, to Ron Gaynor, the town engineer's
Yeah,
memo.
yeah.
Right. And, I think what he was trying to do, I was hoping to connect with him today, but that didn't happen, was trying to cover all bases, because, his job is to look at, what could, just like it's ours, what could happen there. So would you be willing to have restrictions on the number of vehicles as well?
If you're talking like mulch and stuff like that?
No,
is
I'm
that-
talking about vehicles.
Oh,
like-
vehicles.
Yeah, in other words, X amount of large trucks / construction versus employee vehicles.
I get, if this dictates, if we're being forced to put a system in regardless, then I don't think that we should be, I should be stuck at 3 if someone comes with 4.
Agreed.
Because the system's there. If there's leniency in that, then yes, I can see a constraint on that. But if not, if a system's there, then a system's there.
Right, understood. But, you've come to us, and your referral from the planning board, and you've come to us that essentially, we think that we can only rent this for X amount. So we don't really want to, put a tremendous amount of money into it, because there'll be no return on investment. I'm sensitive
Yeah.
to that. I understand that. At the same time, I'm also, sensitive that we want to make sure that the aquifer is protected, and come to a balance
So-
that makes sense.
Well, I mean, and we don't need to talk about financials, but I would just question, why do we think there's a cap on what we could rent this for? Like, I mean, if it's valuable property and it's a valuable service, then, basically fair market value is what drives it,
Yeah.
we don't need to talk about the numbers, it's a public meeting, But I'm just questioning why the strong cap,
The limit on the size on what we're trying to do is gonna dictate, there's the cap on the money on that.
'Cause it's
So
not big enough?
Yeah, it's just not big enough. It's not loose, like if, for a big outfit to come in there, I'd have to have something like 10 trucks, on that site plan and approved. And much more than those concrete bins, and they'd probably have racks to put even equipment and attachments and things like that. We need more than 4 tenant parking, so kind of just the constraints on the size is where there's gonna be a limit on, it's not the sky's the limit kind of
Just for
thing.
me to understand,
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out why you're selling yourself short,
Yeah.
if you were just trying to,
Well,
lowball it, or.
we were trying to do something that was, again, modest, where it wasn't gonna come into a big, go through all, have a whole engineered system and do something small that was enough for us, where, hey, we're not really, causing too much of a disturbance here. If we went that big route, then I could understand, and, we're gonna be going through a lot more hoops, I'm sure, but again, the point of this was just to have something small,
Right.
This is like maybe the amount of vehicles that like someone could even have parked at their house, potentially, or like a multifamily in town, We're talking 3 dump trucks, a skid steer, and potentially 4 tenant parking. I don't even think a company would be parking 4 vehicles at that,
Okay.
So do you have a tenant in mind? I mean, obviously, you've come up with this idea that it has to be landscaping and milling and stone and,
So-
you've thrown everything in there, so clearly you have a landscaper in mind.
No, I
here.
don't. So the idea is site prep. That was probably the least invasive business I could find that could deal with just nature. You could just go park a vehicle out there and without going anything. You can't bring a tenant on a small scale like this, find someone to sign a lease, knowing they have to go through planning boards and all these hoops, because maybe their business would be constrained. So that's the point of doing this. So I know when I have discussions with potential tenants, hey, this is what's allowed on the property, this is what we could bring in, versus, who knows if a tenant comes in and goes into a meeting like this, half their operation might be cut out and just not be allowed,
So if okay, let's say there's a runoff, they bring in millings and the millings were from a gas station and they have oil in it,
Take-
leaks into
No.
the,
We need to interpret Ron's memo. Ron, I believe the spirit of intent of his memo is he was looking at this as, I don't want to call it the worst-case scenario, but a scenario of, well, it could be a construction company, it could be a landscaper, so let's say it was a small excavating company. They would probably have things like millings. Here, if, and we could limit this to landscaper, this is.
Yeah, I don't want millions on my property, to be clear.
Right, so
Yeah.
your ideal tenant would be a landscaper or what else?
A small, realistically, a small excavation company that does site prep. Yeah, site development. So they have a couple of machines, couple of trucks, they need to move some dirt, the quarries are right next to us. They're out on the field doing that. They're not really storing, the concrete bins are there for just in case they need to store something on site, they wanna buy something in bulk. But in reality, we're right next to the quarries,
Right,
so.
right. Okay, so you would be fine with limits on what could go in the bins,
Sure.
right?
I understand mulch and salt and things like that, absolutely,
Right.
it's toxic.
Right. And I assume also you would be fine that we're saying that the site would be limited to 3 trucks and a piece of construction machinery,
If,
Maybe the loader too is.
a loader,
if we're gonna put if we're gonna be taken through to have to put in, the containment systems, then I have to be able, maybe there's 4 trucks. Like, obviously, there's gotta be some sort of spirit of it, but if someone has 4 trucks, what do I do then?
Right. Right.
You know?
I'm trying to come up with a memo that will give the planning board guidance and our concern about the aquifer. and then they let them come back at you what they're looking for at that, and we can work with them. Does that make sense to everybody? Because, you know, I would say that, you know, somebody else might have a vision where I'm gonna build a large, you know, pole barn that's, you know, 40 by 80. And then we would be insisting that the planning board have a SWIP and have impermeable surfaces with
I
a
agree.
stormwater
Yeah.
system. But, you know, then we're all of a sudden talking about a project that's, you know, probably $250,000 or more, and a much bigger rent, and that's not something they wanna get into. So I understand that. So I think we have to be flexible with this, but at the same time, do our best to protect it.
I was a little confused by this as well. This just didn't sound like what we talked about the last time.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
that's why I got a little bit.
I think Ron was looking at, well, because you have a lot of
What it
things
could
that
be,
have been grandfathered, you know, and it's too late to really do much other than if somebody is doing something against one of the codes.
Right.
So,
I will say too, with Ron's memo, I don't think it's up to date with the discussions we've had
I think you're
at this
right.
point, because there are references in there to delineating wetlands, things like that. Those have already been done, and the site plans have been updated. So just, I guess, also keep that in mind.
I appreciate it. We've gone through like 4 iterations, I think. Like, we got the North Highlands sent back their referral, and when I asked him what site plan he was looking at, it was one back from like the end of February or something like that, so it wasn't even the latest.
Right,
Yeah.
right, that makes sense.
For the, from a functionality standpoint of the barrier protection, do we know how much time something like, if there's like a spill, you know, that, not a minor spill, but like something that would have required a barrier like that, do we know how much time a barrier like that buys us, from a seepage standpoint? I mean, obviously, you know, depending upon the material and, you know, porosity and, you know, what kind of material is spilt, aqueous or oil, you know, things like that, I get it. But I just didn't know if, like, we have an idea how much time that kind of thing buys us. Does it buy us months, days?
Well, you know, a well-engineered, if you were using an impervious surface, and a well-engineered system would have drainage with filters. So that would contain a lot within reason, but then the filters have to be maintained, which we rely on the landowner, the homeowner, the business owner to do that. Then, of course, you have something, you know, potentially catastrophic. You're not gonna have a fuel truck in there, but I know a few winters ago, Downey sent a new driver to my driveway and turned over a fuel truck. It was an absolute miracle. There was a small maple that held it sideways and nothing leaked out, but it took a day for them to pump one truck out and what have you. But a spill like that, most containment structures would not handle it unless you were, I mean, you're on the committee dealing with the bulk storage. Then all of a sudden, you're building for that.
Not to put
You're
more maples
engineering.
up.
Yeah.
Who's ultimately responsible? The person that owns the property or the renter?
Both.
If there was a spill, you know, a fuel tank rupture, well, the first thing to do is call the DEC. Then they come down and say, okay, I want this, I want that.
Right.
You call in a containment company and they deal with it from there.
Right.
But for minor stuff, I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's something that he has to be prepared for.
I don't
You know, just a plain old spill kit for just in case.
Okay,
You know.
look, he doesn't want to live here anymore. He wants to move to Florida with his family because he's tired of Garrison winters. If we don't put the things in place now, then
No, it would
he
be on the
sells the
site plan.
property
The site
and
plan's gonna specify
they could do it.
how many vehicles can be there, what can be stored there, what can't be stored there. So if he decided you want to put a 500-gallon fuel tank in for fuel in the trucks, then you gotta come back to the planning board.
Right, so I just want to make sure that what we have now is as, I mean, I understand that, but that everything is in place.
I think we'd have to come back though, outside of this plan, then we're coming back before you guys again. So, I think, cause you guys almost had this discussion with, the people that were building the, house, I think, inside the wetlands when I was here. And you guys wanted to put in, things about them potentially not being Airbnb. But they were saying if they had to, they'd have to come in front of the board again So I think that's the same situation.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah.
It's a good analogy. So what I'll do is I'll craft a memo tomorrow morning, and I'm gonna distribute it. I'd like everybody to look at it, because we need to get this to the planning board at worst Thursday morning. Right? So,
The meeting's Thursday?
yeah, the planning board meeting is Thursday. So, it's a public hearing, yes?
Yep.
Yeah.
On this?
For this project?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. I mean, anything that's considered a major, site requires a public hearing. And the threshold is not great.
Yeah, that's why they gave us the major designation, was because we were on 9, they said, so, and because of our location. It wasn't off of scale of the project, it was strictly because we're on 9
You're
where
on
we're at,
line and
yeah.
you're also within the aquifer.
Which is, the aquifer's a, critical environmental
Yeah.
area. In our comprehensive plan, which I look at, the town votes on the comprehensive plan, and they take the aquifer and, the improvement, character development on Route 9 is a strategy item, and that includes, of course, aquifer, protection guidelines. I don't know that, that that's ever been worked on, or guidelines for aquifer, but protection, even though it is a strategy item, but, it's, to me, it's a big deal, and not to be taken lightly for, a project that's a maybe or might be sort of thing.
Well, I think the notes on the site plan, that's going, there'll be so many trucks, so much material. I think that's gonna cover everything that would concern us. Say if, if the landscaper leaves and you get someone else in there that, that's doing something different. So those notes should cover that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean,
If you get a landscape, we can plant your trees too.
I mean, it's
That's the plan.
unfortunate that, a large part of the town's commercial/industrial district is right along the Clove Creek and its aquifer. Nothing we can really do about that. That's,
Well,
to try to change that, there would be landowners that would be, claiming adverse possession.
Well, when they did the zoning, they said, put all the commercial stuff on Route 9. That was the thought.
Yeah, but it's a lot
We
of.
don't want it in our
predates.
backyard, we want it on 9.
Right. So,
Where our drinking water is.
That's what everybody wanted at the time.
all right, so,
It can always be changed with the town after to do that.
So from the standpoint, I mean, in the best case scenario, I'd feel better with a barrier, right? So some type of barrier, whether it was, like Andy said, the proper impervious barrier, or something, like engineered materials.
The geotextile,
Specific,
yeah.
something that
Yeah.
would offer some protection and slow down a spill, and have some maybe runoff, protection, places where it would be known to puddle and you can, catch bins or something. But what would be the, and you don't have to give me a number, but like, to have that discussion with the planning board as to what those engineering controls that you build into this project are, like, think about the number of trucks that would make that equitable for you to make that investment, and then be able to say, okay, well, now I can maybe go to a slightly bigger client instead of a small landscaping. I can go to a smaller construction company or something, and that's more lucrative for me. So it's worth that investment. Think of that
Yeah,
balance.
that's a good
because,
idea, yeah.
like, I would certainly rather see the money spent rather than on the berm, on the barrier and traps, and, for catching runoff, something functional that way, especially over Clove Creek, the aquifer, rather than, visual, because we are on an industrial area, people driving by a lot of industrial sites, you see a berm around the concrete plant, you still know it's a concrete plant over there, so. You just look.
Just putting on the glasses with the mustache, right? Yeah.
It's like they're hiding something in there.
But yeah, so I would rather see the money spent on something functional that way. And,
yeah.
and I get it, like writing it into the site plan does kind of limit it, but I think there's always and I'm not, it's not a criticism, but there's always room for creep, you know, like, so, you know, something that's
Yep.
gonna get a little bit bigger beyond what was expected. Maybe if, you know, you move on, like we said, you go to Florida, wherever she sent
Zero.
you.
We just landed the third generation for my family in here.
You're here for a while.
I'm not going anywhere. I was born in Butterfield. My parents live here. My whole family lives here.
Yeah, no,
I don't like Florida.
but anyway, so you see the balance, I think, we're trying.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, we're trying to, it's exactly that. Okay, I think I know what I need to put together, and then I'll distribute it to everybody and make comments, and
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
have a good evening. Okay, what's that?
They might be here. This violation. That's them. That's what they're saying.
Or, what is it, Barry and Vivian Randall? Okay. Just 1 second. Let's just, I think we can do this quickly vis-à-vis Century Aggregates, you know.
Oh, yeah. Did you all get the memo? They had a public hearing last week, and quite a few people showed up. And they, at the end of the public hearing, the planning board voted to keep the public hearing open for their next, they're gonna accept public comments, and the hearing is open till their next meeting, which is Thursday, June 12 at 7 o'clock. So the Hudson Highland Land Trust spoke, and like I said, many citizens spoke out. It was really good. So it's on everybody's radar. We've received a lot of letters too, so the people are looking out for any of the interested parties. But does anyone have any questions about what's going on?
Are we officially invited in, or we're, what's our role?
Essentially, the planning board was originally mentioned as an interested party to give notice. I had spoken to the town supervisor, and thought that the conservation board is probably in a better position to follow this. And, the main concerns that we have right now is both water usage, because they're talking about 10,000 gallons a day from the aquifer, and contamination of the aquifer. So, John Van Tassel agreed that we should send a memo to them and let them know that the conservation board will be following this. And hopefully they will, provide us with communications that we need to look at it. Normally, the town of Philipstown allows what goes on in Fishkill to be their business and vice versa. There have been a few exceptions. I guess about 10, 12 years ago, there was a giant mobile home park proposed in Fishkill, but it would have been in an area that's served by the Haldane School District, which would have probably inundated it, and thus the town got involved. So, we'll see from there. If the project becomes bigger and there are issues with pollution, meaning air pollution and noise pollution, that could be a planning board issue. It's certainly a New York DEC issue. Traffic, we would go to the planning board, most likely. So we'll see where we go with this.
They spoke out about the noise, because it is right on the edge of Philipstown. The school bus is there, but the dust that goes out into the air, the filter system, right, that'll directly affect those residents in Philipstown that live right next to it.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah,
all
it's-
came in force, a lot of
It's a
those.
pretty substantial operation, just what they've been proposing
Yeah,
and
because
what they're doing now there.
The tower goes up 60 feet, and it's past their height limit of fish trust. They'd have to give, the additional okay with that. Their original environmental impact study, they I hope I can explain this right, but they shrunk the size of the plant so they wouldn't have to have more of state inquiries into the size of the plant. So they went from saying we're going to use X amount of acreage to the small side of acreage that they're going to use on they own 300 acres. And they're saying they're just using this little 10-acre plot, but they'll probably end up, doing more, but the environmental impact studies are all just for this little 10 acre, but their original submission was for a larger section, 20 acres that they were going to use, but they realized it put them in a different level of project, so they moved it back, so they moved it down
I mean,
to,
just, my opinion is the type of operation clearly impacts across borders, like the
Yeah.
pollution or the agreement with Fishkill is irrelevant to Philipstown and the residents that live on the line. So I think
Yeah.
the whole planning board should be involved, for sure,
and I
and the
think,
conservation board.
and there's a concrete plant, in Westchester that falls into one of the bodies of water. I didn't see someone just sent me the link, so I didn't get a chance to read it today, but it was on News 12 where the plant leaked into the body of water. You could just see the white stuff, the ooze coming into the water where this guy was kayaking. I think it might have been around the Bronx area. Yeah, and so you could just see all this stuff coming, and on first look, that's why, this project with Gatekeepers is so important. We have to make sure these things are in place now, because it can happen at any time.
Yeah, I mean, again, these plants are big industrial processes, and they shed particles and pollution. I mean, I've been on my boat in the Hudson years ago, and, up the Hudson higher where all the industry is, and particles were raining down on our boat, and we had a race to get away from it, things happen like that with these type of systems.
Yeah, there's a 20-mile
So-
radius that the dust
Right.
can go out.
So
20
why
miles.
build something on such a scenic spot of the Hudson? That's supposed to be the gateway to Fishkill.
Exactly.
Is that how you say welcome to Fishkill?
Yeah.
Goodbye to Philipstown?
I mean, I would suggest that the board put another memo together and, get the town board's perspective on sending that memo with your comments again, because at this next meeting that's coming up, there is the potential that they could close it,
Yes.
and that's that. So I don't think, because there was a big turnout in Fishkill this last meeting, that means that we stop corresponding. So I think that if that opportunity presents itself, we should continue suggesting that it remain open so that more discussion and review can happen in an open setting, if we're not going to be an involved agency from the town's perspective.
Yeah, because the Century Aggregate.
So I think the thing that I find actually the most concerning is, to my knowledge right now, a positive declaration has not been made under secret for this.
Right.
It's right now being looked at as an unlisted action. That to me is a little bit of a red flag. So.
Yeah, that is, they did try to, they were trying to oppose the public hearing being open to the next meeting, saying, okay, well, we won't allow a public hearing, but we'll allow public comment, which happens all the time. It happened here for developments. It's what developers ask for now, public hearings to be closed, but we'll keep the public comment period open, which is the new thing. But the planning board said no to that, which was good. But to your point, they probably could this time, saying, okay, we'll leave the comment open, till July or something. And
Are those meetings televised?
oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they're very long, but they have their public hearings at the beginning. But they can run 3 to 4 hours, so you kind of want to be at the top of it.
When did you say the next public hearing? 7th,
June
June?
12th, on Thursday at 7 p.m. And it's their next scheduled meeting. Do you think your town board will be writing something?
We can discuss it, after we get feedback from you and the planning board.
Okay.
So we should probably expand the memo that you started putting together and distribute it between us in the next week, and we'll add
Okay.
our thoughts. As I said, my mind on top of we were very polite in the memo that we sent out.
Very.
But the other thing that is a bit of a red flag is right now it's still an unlisted action under CEQA. And Personally, I think there should be a positive declaration in something like this. Okay.
It's only a cement plant.
Yeah, it's only a cement plant. I mean, you do need cement to build, so I'm sensitive to that, but, okay, I'm sorry for putting you off. So is it Barry and Vivian Randall? Randall?
Vivian, Randall, Barry.
Okay. Barry, okay. So, Max, you probably know more about this than the rest of us.
Yeah, I guess, so obviously you got the notice of violation in the mail. You know, I witnessed extensive clearing on your property, that directly almost is on the bank of, a regulated watercourse that flows into Clove Creek. So I invited you here today to kind of bring the board, up to speed on what's going on and get their attention. And then we can talk about steps to move forward with remediating the violation, obviously. So if you can kind of give us a sense of what's been going on there, for how long, the extent of the work that you've done. It seems like it's been going on for a while, just based on, you know, my driving by over the past few years. So yeah, if you can just bring us up to speed.
Well, let me see. I own 5.5 acres of land, and that area that I've started to open up over the last few years is maybe less than 20% of the whole property that I own. I grow all my own food. It takes about 1 acre to 1.5 acres of land to actually support a person per year. So I knew I couldn't build anything on it, and I know in 2005 when the DEC remapped the area, I had a conservation guy come from the DEC and walk through the property with me, and he said what I was doing was a good thing. I'm not an industry. I'm a single person that's growing food and raising food, and I didn't see that opening an area up and removing some of the invasives that are there to create more space to grow was an issue. It's just, I felt a responsible way of using the property. So that's, you know, my goal is to grow more food.
Yeah. Okay. From my perspective, I think there probably was a mixture of invasive plants there, but there was, you know, it was also a wooded area. You know, you took trees down there that were significant sized.
The trees were all choked with European bittersweet,
Yeah.
and multiflora and poison ivy and grapevines, wild grapevines. All the trees that I took down had lost all of their lower limbs, and a few of them were really kind of dead because they've been choked out. I mean, this is a piece of property that's been sitting there, and invasives have been growing and choking everything out.
I mean, even so, we do regulate all of those activities under Chapter 93. You would have needed to come before the board to get a permit to do that work.
I really didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was. I mean, it didn't even occur to me because I've been the steward of this property for the last 27 years, and I've been doing some really wonderful things with the property. I've introduced a lot of native species that have been choked out by all the invasives. So I feel like I'm being a responsible landowner. I'm not an industry. I'm surrounded by industry on every boundary of my property is industry. I'm trying to give back to the property. I'm trying to nurture the land, and I believe that I'm in that process of doing that. So it never occurred to me that I needed a permit to take care of a piece of property the way it should be taken care of.
I mean, the purpose of the board is really to provide some guidance. That's why the process is to come first and, you know, kind of get that guidance. But, I mean, it's water on the bridge if it's already done. So this kind of is the supplemental process that there's a violation, you made a mistake, let's try and help you remediate it.
So you tell me how you see a way to remediate this, because
Vivian, you made her my name is Tom Carano. I'm a friend of Vivian, single woman. I'm kind of a co-conspirator with Vivian because she approached me. I have a lot of land use background, and she said, what do I have here? And we looked, she identified quite a few species of vines that encumber the canopy and destroy trees. So we actively went out there together and started cutting the vines at the base of the tree like you do, watching them die over a few months. And the next step, maybe she overstepped her boundaries by cutting it, but she did have a communication with somebody who advised her they knew a good person who could clean that property up, do a nice job, and allow it to do some of the things she wants to do with it. But unfortunately, probably should have come here to your board. Certainly have a lot of respect for what you guys do. I sit on the Putnam Valley Planning Board as vice chairman for 18 years, so I do the same thing you guys are doing here every day, every month. But so Vivian and I got involved with cutting a lot of that stuff down. She took the advice of someone else. She brought a contractor in who basically did a decent job. There's one probably tree that was a specimen size, but it was a dead tulip tree. The two trees that are standing there now on the Route 9 side are covered. Well, do you have photographs? Did you bring photographs of any of this?
Yeah, I have some.
I don't know if the board is interested in seeing that, but in your defense, you didn't really cut or destroy anything that was good. We walked in here together and came out with covered in ticks and kind of made a female water snake a little uncomfortable and a couple of black rat snakes. But after that, we, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what the board has. The property is cleared up to within your buffer requirements, so 50 feet, 100 feet?
100 feet.
100 feet.
Yeah.
So 100 feet property is probably encumbers most of that little lot there. But in Vivian's defense, everything that was cut was an invasive. There were no species there that were of any significance.
So since, other than Max, this is sight unseen, two ways the board can handle this. One is we all do a site visit, or the other is we let Max handle this. I can go either
Well,
way.
I'm comfortable letting Max. I have a question though. What's there now? Just bare soil?
I think I should see it.
It's,
What's that?
You should see it.
Okay, so let's arrange a site
Okay.
visit then. Let's arrange a site visit.
The contractor that did the work in the wetlands is a local person?
yeah, it's,
I had a friend that knew somebody from Yorktown.
Mm-hmm. Because their insurance might be able to cover any damages.
Well, it's my property, so I will take full responsibility for whatever you feel the remediation is. So if you can give me a sense of what you think should be done at this point, I will take that.
Because, yeah,
you know.
I think the first step, like Andy
We need to
alluded
do a
to,
site
look.
visit.
we'll come and look at the property, and we'll make an assessment on
Mm-hmm.
how to move forward from the board's perspective. You know, I'm not trying to be punitive here and just look to give you a financial fine, essentially. We're looking at we want to be effective in restoring what's protecting the resource. And essentially that's protecting water quality and the function, even in the case of invasives at times, although I don't agree with you that it was all invasive based on what I've seen there, over the years. You know, there are no hardwood tree species, or maybe one or two that I can name to you that would, they weren't completely in that area. So, you know, you're not looking at a forest of ailanthus trees there, for example. So anyway, I would like to see the board visit the site, and we'll start to move forward with a solution. Obviously, you cannot continue to clear in that area, or continue to work there until we come up with, you know, a way to move forward. That's where it stands now.
And when you do the site visit, could you please look at the brook that runs through the property that I have maintained for the last 27 years, because trees fall over that brook. And if I hadn't, through my own expense and my own labor, removed trees that have fallen across the brook, that whole neighborhood would be flooded right now. So I have been taking responsibility to keep that waterway clear so it actually can move. It has a place to go. So keep that in mind, and if you can look at the waterway, and if there's any help or support that you can offer me to continue to maintain this property, it's a huge responsibility.
What are you gonna do with that area?
I want to grow more food. I want to put fruit trees in. I want to put berries in. I want to be able to use the property that I own. I'm not building anything on it. I'm not pouring a concrete slab. I'm not parking vehicles on it. I'm using the property as land so that it can support me, my family, my friends, and the community around me.
So let's set up a site visit.
Let's set up a site visit.
So do we have your email address? Can we get your email address so Cheryl can coordinate that with you?
Can we ask a couple of questions first? That stream that runs into Cove, do you know the classification? I don't even know the name of it. I tried to look it up. Is there a name or?
The town regulates everything from
No,
intermittent water
understood.
courses.
Yeah, we don't know the
Understood.
name of the
We didn't
brook.
know there's a status, there's a rating for streams.
DEC
whether
has
it's-
ratings, but what I'm telling you is that we're even more restrictive than the DEC. So within Chapter 93 of the Philipstown
Understand.
Code, we can regulate something that's a seasonal stream.
Right.
So which it may run dry. That stream may run dry, but
It never runs dry.
So
Well, in the
then you're
27
even-
years that I've lived there, it's
right.
never
So
run.
then you're even in. We would regulate that no matter what.
Do you have a name for that stream? We don't know what it's called.
I can look for you and see if I have any resources or.
And it is a floodplain. Essentially, last week, the highway department came and put cones up because right outside Lee's tree service there, the road was flooded with a foot of
Yeah.
water. So that occurs just every time there's a heavy rain.
Yeah, I mean, all the more reason. I mean, a lot of these regulations,
Sure.
happened after the development.
I'm with you guys.
Yeah.
I understand that. But if there's a way where she could take the damage that she's done to mitigate that, maybe memorialize a portion back from the stream and maybe a little bit of, with boulders or something, and do something with the road portion, maybe some trees or something like that. Vivian's not against this. We had long conversations about this. And she'll do what she has to do. But, your guidance, obviously.
Yeah.
I think we need to see the site.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a hypothetical, and, we are not punitive in nature,
No.
so.
Do you have an idea about how much of the space you want to plant with trees? Or, for produce, what kind of percentage or you don't have to have us now, but when we come at the site visit, if you can maybe help us understand like what areas you're looking to,
Well, it's a small area that is cleared. It's only about 35 feet by about 45 feet.
I think it's
Roughly.
larger than that.
Well, you can come and measure it. I mean, I kind of eyeball everything. I'm not very exact.
When we do the site
Yeah.
visit,
Yeah, you
that's
can,
right for all.
you can do all that.
And one of the problems she has is it's clay. It's a heavy soil right there. And in order to try to grow fruit trees, we talked about this. I have a small farm in Ulster County where I had to clean up for the last decade things that were overgrown, invasives. But when you try to dig and plant, let's say you wanted to plant a pear tree, and you dig a hole, when you have clay, you can't do that. What you have to do is you have to raise it up with topsoil because that hole fills up with water and the roots just basically rot. It doesn't, you can't plant like she's describing. And I kind of disappointed her. I said, Vivian, you're gonna have to do more, and maybe collectively you could come up with an idea where she could have a small portion along there and have a few fruit trees, and the rest of it could be memorialized with boulders and let it go back, and she could do a mitigation, or if you come up with a mitigation plan of plants that are better than what's there. obviously,
Yeah.
she's open to it. Sorry.
Okay. So we'll set up a site visit.
We just need your contact information, other than your mailing address. So if we can
Okay.
just get that before you leave.
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anything else, or?
More water.
Okay.
All
We're gonna pass on that.
I have a
So,
okay.
do I have a motion?
Got another
To adjourn
week
the
of
meeting.
rain coming too.
Okay, second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.